Our text is Daniel 12:1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was, since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. I've been doing Preparing for the Time of Trouble seminar presentations for over 10 years in churches and camp meetings and virtually online. Occasionally, I will have someone ask, why would we do any preparing if God promises that our bread and water will be sure during the time of trouble? This view would make it appear to be a lack of trust in God to prepare anything for the time of trouble. I have a study on preparingforthetime-of-trouble.com on whether it is showing a lack of faith to be a Christian prepper. You may want to refer to that for more detail. These people's understanding is based on some very compelling statements from the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. The Bible promises, he who walks righteously and speaks uprightly, he who despises the gain of oppressions, who gestures with his hands, refusing bribes, who stops his ears from hearing of bloodshed, and shuts his eyes from seeing evil. He will dwell on high. His place of defense will be the fortress of rocks. Bread will be given him, and his water will be sure. Isaiah 33. This is reinforced by a statement in the book Last Day Events, page 264. The Lord has shown me repeatedly that it is contrary to the Bible to make any provision for our temporal wants in the time of trouble. I saw that if the saints had food laid up by them, or in the field at the time of trouble, when sword, famine, and pestilence are in the land, it would be taken from them by violent hands, and strangers would reap their fields. Then will be the time for us to trust wholly in God, and He will sustain us. I saw that our bread and water will be sure at that time, and that we shall not lack or suffer hunger. For God is able to spread a table for us in the wilderness. If necessary, He would send ravens to feed us, as He did with Elijah, or rain manna from heaven, as He did for the Israelites. Another statement in Last Day Events adds this: I saw that a time of trouble was before us, when stern necessity will compel the people of God to live on bread and water. In the time of trouble, none will labor with their hands. Their sufferings will be mental, and God will provide food for them. Last Day Events, page 265. Is there a contradiction here when we compare to the counsel to move out of the cities? Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities into the country where they can raise their own provisions, for in the future the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. Last Day Events, page 99. Actually, when understood correctly, there is no contradiction at all. This misunderstanding by some is due to the fact that their view of the time of trouble envisions there being only one time of trouble. But you will see in this study that there is, in fact, more than one time of trouble. The first presentation of my Preparing for the Time of Trouble seminar series presentations explains this in detail as found in Part 1, Spiritual Lessons of the Two Times of Trouble, at www.preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com. In that presentation, we established that there is a dividing point between two different times of trouble. The little time of trouble is the time when there's the mark of the beast and the problem of not being able to buy or sell for those who are faithful and do not take the mark of the beast. The second time of trouble, often simply called the time of trouble, is when the plagues fall and the faithful run to the hills because of the death decree. Revelation 13 tells about this. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their hand or on their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that have the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Revelation 14. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever. And they will have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Matthew 24. When ye therefore see the abomination of desolation spoke of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. Then let them that are in Judea flee to the mountains. And except these days be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. So we're going to develop, as was in part 1 of the series, a timeline. And it's going from now till the second coming of Christ. The close of probation starts the time of trouble. When Jesus leaves his position as man's intercessor before God, the solemn announcement is made, He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He that is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. He that is holy, let him be holy still. Then the restraining spirit of God is withdrawn from the earth. So the dividing line on this chart is the close of probation, the time when everybody has made their final decision, and he that is filthy will be filthy still, and he that is righteous will be righteous still. The close of probation starts the time of trouble. Last day events 253. When Jesus leaves his position as man's intercessor before God, the solemn announcement is made. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He that is filthy, let him be filthy still. So, this close of probation is also the time when Jesus leaves his position as our defense attorney in the court above, where Satan is the prosecuting attorney, claiming we aren't worthy of being saved. And this tribunal is before God the Father. Fortunately, the Father and the Son are on our side, and those who have their names written in the book of life are brought before this tribunal, with Satan trying to keep those people from being saved. And once this final judgment is made of the very last person that makes their decision for or against the mark of the beast, then probation closes. At that point, Jesus changes his role from being our defense attorney to being the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. When Christ has ceased his work as mediator on man's behalf, then this time of trouble will begin. Then the case of every soul will have been decided, and there is no more atoning blood to cleanse for sin. So the reason there's no more atoning blood is because everybody's made their final decision once and for all. Probation has closed. No one will change their mind. And then Jesus' offer of salvation is no longer needed because those who are lost are not going to ask for forgiveness and change their mind. So on the right-hand side of this chart, we have the close of probation as the dividing line. And this, it said, we just read, is the beginning of this time of trouble. So for now, we're going to call this right-hand side the time of trouble. But as we move forward, we will change the name because there's two times of trouble on this chart. Daniel 12:1, and at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was. A time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that's found written in the book. So during this time of trouble, it is a time of trouble such as has never been or ever will be again. It's the worst time of trouble ever. Matthew 24. When ye therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever readeth, let him understand. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the hills and the mountains. So this is a time when we flee to the mountains, and we are changing this name to be more accurate, Jacob's time of trouble, because they flee to the mountains because there's a death decree. So what causes the saints to flee to the mountains? The death decree. Revelation 13. He had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Last day events 259. The decree has been passed by the highest earthly authority that they shall worship the beast and receive his mark under pain of persecution and death. So we're going to add to our right-hand side of this chart the death decree. And that's the reason why the saints are fleeing to the mountains, because the death decree. Now it's during this time, after the close of probation, that the 7 last plagues are poured out. And they're listed in Revelation 16. The first one is grievous sores. The second one, the salt water turns to blood. The third one, the fresh water turns to blood. The fourth is the sun scorching heat. The fifth, tongue-gnawing pain. The sixth, the waters are dried up. And 7, islands and mountains disappear, and giant 75-pound hailstones. So we're going to add this to the list, that after the close of probation, during this time of trouble, the 7 last plagues are poured out on those with the mark of the beast. So putting this all together, this time of trouble on the right-hand side, which for now we're calling Jacob's time of trouble, starts with the close of probation. There's a death decree which results in the saints fleeing to the mountains. It's at that time their bread and water is sure. There is no more saving the lost because they've made their final decisions. God is showing he's all powerful by executing the 7 last plagues on the wicked, and the righteous are not affected by these plagues. And they have total dependence on God for safety and for food and water. So what happens before this time of trouble? Revelation 13. And he caused all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or on their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell save he that has the mark or the name of the beast and the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man, and his number is 666. So, on this left-hand side of the chart, we have a different kind of time of trouble because they're not fleeing to the mountains. They are being persecuted over the mark of the beast, and they aren't able to buy or sell. That's different than fleeing to the mountains and bread and water is sure. You will see. Revelation 13, and no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark. So we have the mark of the beast, and those who don't take the mark of the beast can't buy or sell. Last day events 228. The image of the beast in the Sunday law. The image of the beast represents that form of apostate Protestantism which will be developed when the Protestant churches shall seek the aid of the civil power for the enforcement of their dogmas. Mark of the beast. When the test comes, it will be clearly shown that the mark of the beast it is the keeping of Sunday. If this is a new concept to you, this is not the case right now. The issue of Sabbath and Sunday is not clearly understood by Christianity. And when we get to this mark of the beast time period, then God will make it clear. And people will be making a choice under clearly understood options. The sign or seal of God is revealed in the observance of the seventh-day Sabbath, the Lord's memorial of creation. The mark of the beast is the opposite of this, the observance of the first day of the week. Last day events 224. So we're going to add this to the list, that this starts with the National Sunday Law, and we're calling this the little time of trouble. So we have the little time of trouble, which is the mark of the beast and not being able to buy and sell. And then we have Jacob's time of trouble when you flee to the mountains and your bread and water are sure. Now we get the name the little time of trouble from the book Last Day Events, chapter 10. This phraseology is not found in the Bible or in Ellen White, but when the book Last Day Events was compiled, the editors came up with the name the little time of trouble. And so that's the name of the chapter. So that's what we're calling this first time of trouble prior to the close of probation. And in chapter 10, it lists different characteristics. Here are but a few. We will be persecuted for truth's sake. Some will be imprisoned. Will be treated as traitors. So when we put all these pieces together, this little time of trouble on the left-hand side in the red includes the mark of the beast threat, the not buying and selling if you're faithful, and therefore it would be good to be sustainably independent. And we have counsel to move out of the cities into the country because the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. Therefore, we need to be able to raise our own provisions by having a garden. It also gives us time to help other people. Probation has not closed, so it's our last attempts to reach the lost. And just like during Jacob's time of trouble, we need to be totally dependent on God. Lately, it's become obvious to me that there is, in fact, 3 times of trouble. And I'd like to share that with you at this point. Interestingly, James White, Ellen White's husband, created a time chart, which I have not been able to locate a facsimile of the actual chart, but he is described as having made a chart. And so I made a chart based on that information. He calls the little time of trouble the lesser time of trouble. And he believed it started in 1844. He wrote this in about the end, about 1847, somewhere in that range. So the 1844 Great Disappointment had just been their experience a few years before. So he assumed that 1844 was the beginning of the lesser time of trouble, as he called it, up until the close of probation. Then he split what we previously called Jacob's time of trouble into two parts. The first one he called the greater time of trouble, and the second part was Jacob's time of trouble, with the 7 last plagues going through both of them, and there being a dividing line somewhere in the middle of that to differentiate when Jacob's time of trouble started, and it ends with the voice of God at the second coming. So here is the written description of this chart. This comes from Ellen G. White, Letters and Manuscripts with Annotations, Volume 1, page 51, paragraph 4. Now, you need to understand that the Ellen White estates have most all of Ellen White's letters and manuscripts that were unpublished, and there's such a volume of these that they don't publish them all. But as the years go by, they find quotations that they feel are pertinent, and they will collect a bunch of them and release them as published manuscripts and letters. That's the case here, which they published in 2014. But it also includes annotations, which means the compilers, as they collected these things, explained some of what they were showing. So this is one of those annotations. This is not Ellen White's words. This is the compiler's explanation. It says the time of troubled vision. This is the one where Ellen White had the vision in early writings. The time of troubled vision increased James White's interest in the progression of final events. In 1847, he had developed a three-phase time of trouble, beginning in 1844 and continuing until the voice of God at the second coming. These three phases were the lesser time of trouble, the greater time of trouble, and Jacob's time of trouble. The lesser trouble began in 1844, while Jesus continued his work as high priest. The greater time of trouble, yet future, would begin when Jesus laid aside his priestly robes and probation closed. Then the 7 last plagues would be poured out, and Jacob's time of trouble would occur just before the second coming. So we're now modifying this chart to make it in keeping with our current terminology of the little and time of trouble. So we're now looking at the little time of trouble, which I believe we can show starts with the Sunday law rather than 1844, and it goes till the close of probation. The title Little Time of Trouble comes from the title of the chapter in Last Day Events of chapter 10. You can clearly see that the title of that chapter is The Little Time of Trouble. Again, Little Time of Trouble isn't per se in the Bible or in the Spirit of Prophecy. It's a name that was given by the compilers of Last Day Events, Ellen White's quotations. So we're using that. It's commonly referred to these days as the little time of trouble. This is a quotation. The commencement of that time of trouble, here mentioned from early writings, page 33, published in 1847, does not refer to the time when the plagues shall be poured out. So what this is saying is, in early writings on page 33, Ellen White used the term the commencement of that time of trouble. Now notice the word that instead of the commencement, the beginning of that time of trouble, and that created some confusion among readers of early writings. So later on, she clarified what she meant in her own words. So this is her words, her explaining what she meant in early writings 33. The commencement of that time of trouble here mentioned does not refer to that time when the plagues will be poured out, but a short period before that, they are poured out while Christ is in the sanctuary. So that's before the close of probation. It's a little time of trouble. At that time, while the work of salvation is closing, trouble will be coming on the earth and the nations will be angry, yet held in check, so as to not prevent the work of the third angel. Early Writings, page 85, is where this is clarified. Um, in 1851 is when she clarified her statements that were printed originally in 1847 edition of Early Writings. Now notice the explanation. Ellen White used the word "that" time of trouble rather than "the" time of trouble, as in 1847. So she's making it sound like there's more than one time of trouble. Also notice Ellen White says this time of trouble, the little time of trouble, is a short period before the plagues are poured out and the close of probation. So apparently she did not ascribe to the idea that the little time of trouble started in 1844, as James White surmised. So now let's look at the chart based on that. It starts with the Sunday law and ends with the close of probation, and we're going to look at how we come to the Sunday law as the starting point. Last day events 144 to 146. A great crisis awaits the people of God. Very soon our nation will attempt to enforce upon all the observance the first day of the week as a sacred day. There will come a time when, because of our advocacy of the Bible truth, we will be treated as traitors. Those who honor the Bible Sabbath will be denounced as enemies of law and order. Now let's take a look at the great time of trouble. We get that name, again, from Last Day Events, the title for chapter 18, The Seven Last Plagues in the Righteous, the Great Time of Trouble. Again, the name the Great Time of Trouble isn't in the Bible or generally in the Spirit of Prophecy, but it is a title that we have attached to this period based on the title of chapter 18 and Last Day Events. So when does the death decree happen? I saw that the four angels, this is Early Writings, page 36, I saw that the four angels would hold the four winds until Jesus' work was done in the sanctuary, and then will come the seven last plagues. These plagues enraged the wicked against the righteous. They thought that we had brought the judgments of God upon them, and that if they could get rid of the earth of us, the plagues would be stayed. A decree went forth to slay the saints, that caused them to cry day and night for deliverance. This was the time of Jacob's trouble. So there is the title, Jacob's time of trouble, and it's a result of the death decree, which is the result of some of the plagues having been poured out, and the wicked saying, wait a minute, the plagues are being poured out on us, but not on those people. If we get rid of them, we'll get rid of the plagues. Kind of like reminiscent of Pharaoh with Egypt and Moses. Continuing, then all the saints cried out with anguish of spirit and were delivered by the voice of God. So the death decree starts Jacob's time of trouble, clearly. Last day events 261. A decree will finally be issued against those who hallow the Sabbath of the fourth commandment, denouncing them as deserving of the severest punishment and giving the people liberty after a certain date to put them to death. Romanism in the Old World and apostate Protestantism in the New will pursue a similar course toward those who honor all the divine precepts. The people of God will then be plunged into those scenes of affliction and distress described by the prophet as the time of Jacob's trouble. So once again, we have clear evidence that the death decree starts the time of Jacob's trouble. So the death decree starts Jacob's time of trouble. So when does the death decree happen in the sequence of the seven last plagues? When Christ ceases his intercession in the sanctuary, the unmingled wrath, that's the close of probation, the unmingled wrath threatened against those who worship the beast in his image and receive his mark will be poured out. That's the seven last plagues. The plagues upon Egypt when God was about to deliver Israel was similar in character to those more terrible and extensive judgments which are to fall upon the world just before the final deliverance of God's people. Great Controversy 635. When the protection of human laws shall be withdrawn from those who honor the law of God, there will be in different lands a simultaneous movement for their destruction. As the time appointed for the decree draws near, the people will conspire to root out the hated sect. It will be determined to strike in one night a decisive blow which shall utterly silence the voice of dissent and reproof. Here again is a death decree. Last day events 245. I saw the four angels that were holding back the four winds until Jesus' work was done in the sanctuary. And then will come the seven last plagues. These plagues enraged the wicked against the righteous. They thought that we had brought the judgments of God upon them. And if they could get rid of the earth of us, the plagues would be stayed. A decree went forth to slay the saints, which caused them to cry day and night for deliverance. So here again is the death decree. And the death decree is the result of the wicked being inflicted by the early stages of the seven last plagues. And they realize that the righteous are not being affected by the plagues. So if they get rid of the righteous with a death decree, then the plagues would go away. Says the Revelator in describing those terrific scourges, there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon which them that worship the image. You will recall that the first plague is noisome and grievous sores. So there's plague number one. The sea became as blood of dead men, and every living soul died in the sea. There's plague number two. And the rivers and fountains of waters became blood. There's number three. So we have the first three plagues. Continuing, by condemning the people of God to death, they have as truly incurred the guilt of their blood as it had been shed by their hands. So there we have what I believe is the death decree after the third plague. We then have the fourth plague, last day events 245. Then the plague that follows after this death decree statement. Power is given to the sun to scorch with fire, and Revelation 16 continues to list these remaining plagues. We have the fourth plague, which is scorching sun. We have the fifth plague, which is darkness and pain. Sixth plague, Euphrates dries up. Seventh plague, earth is utterly shaken. So it appears that the death decree is followed by plagues 4 through 7. So here is my revised version of the time of trouble chart as has been available as a download on preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com for a long time. And I have modified it now to include 3 times of trouble rather than 2. We have us now, then we would have a national Sunday law, which will start the little time of trouble, which is when you can't buy or sell, when you should have already moved into the country and learned how to garden so you can sustain yourself. Then when all of the evangelistic efforts have been done, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, the loud cry, the last big effort to save the lost has happened, and every single human being has made their final choice, then probation closes, Michael stands up, Jesus ends being our defense attorney, and he puts on his kingly robes and becomes the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and probation is closed. This begins the 7 last plagues, with the first 3 plagues, then the death decree, then the remaining 4 to 7 plagues. And once the death decree happens, that's the point at which the saints flee to the mountains and their bread and water is sure. So we have the 7 last plagues through both the great time of trouble and Jacob's time of trouble. There's no more saving the lost because probation is closed. Everybody's made their decision. God sustains the saints throughout, and bread and water is sure. This chart is available in the downloads of preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com, And you will see on the right is a complete list of all the references from which these points on the chart were made. So you can study it for yourself. And please note the disclaimer on the left. This chart is not meant to be definitive. The reader should study to verify and modify as the Spirit leads. So what do we do now? It's the call to leave the cities. It's a call to become sustainable so that during the little time of trouble, we can be part of the solution and not part of the problem. We need to now be working towards learning how to garden, how to live out in the country, away from the violence of the cities, and become as sustainably independent as possible. So what are the takeaways from this presentation? First of all, now is the time to prepare by moving into the country. Now is the time to develop our gardening skills. You can't just go to some bare land and have produce to eat. It takes years for fruit trees to become mature. It takes years of experimenting and learning to know how to make ground productive in growing gardens. So now is the time to develop our gardening skills. Now is the time to work on being able to sustain ourselves during the little time of trouble, because the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. And I maintain that goes beyond gardening skills. When you look at your life and you say, what is it that I have to pull my wallet out for now? And if I couldn't buy or sell, what areas of my life would I be in trouble? And is there some way that I can position myself to be self-sustaining in those areas, whether it's water supply, whether it's heat, whether it's sewage, whatever. Now is the time to draw closer to Jesus and allow him to perfect our characters before the close of probation. When the close of probation comes, our characters will not change. We will have already allowed Jesus to perfect our characters. That carries on through eternity, whatever character development we've done. When Jesus returns, we're changed in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye. But that is us going from mortal to immortal, from going from a sin-ravished human being with aging and illness and deterioration to a fully vibrant, created being like Adam through eternity. So now is the time to draw closer to Jesus and allow him to perfect our characters before the close of probation. Because then he that is righteous will let him be righteous still. He that is holy, let him be holy still. And last of all, when probation closes, we will be protected by God and our bread and water will be sure. That's the time when our gardens won't do us any good, our provisions won't do us any good. That's the time when our homes won't do us any good. We will be fleeing for our lives into the mountains, and God will protect us, and he will find places of solitude where we can gather and worship him and stay out of harm's way. And angels will protect us, and our bread and our water will be sure. And God can feed us in the wilderness, spread a table in the wilderness if necessary. He can provide for us wild edible plants that are available. He could provide us, feed us with ravens like he did with Elijah, or he could rain down manna from heaven like he did for the Israelites. Praise God that he is always looking out for us, and he has paved the way for us to have eternal life with him forever. The book of Revelation is not just about gloom and doom. It's about victory, and it's about Jesus being our defense attorney against Satan, and for Jesus promising to return, that where he is, we can be with him also. To see this presentation again or share it with a friend, it's preparing for the timeoftrouble.com, part 185, the 3 times of trouble.